because there was nothing to disclose, he says. But some critics are calling it collusion. So, which is it? I asked the former Republican chairman of the House Intelligence Committee and now a CNN national security commentator, Mike Rogers.
It's certainly not a crime. The lack of transparency, to me, is the biggest part of this issue. I think they all made an interesting decision. Apparently, 3 of them did know that this information was at least purported to come from the Russian government. You know, the first reaction to that is if any foreign government tries to come here and provide information on your opponent of any stripe, I don't care what party you are, what your philosophical bent is, the first call ought to be to the FBI, and that didn't happen. And so it's a little bit concerning to me that their judgment allowed them to go and sit in the meeting, and then the notion that they just were not consistent in disclosing and transparent about the meeting and who was in the meeting and what was talked about in the meeting. That's all very concerning to me.
And so there are some in that circle who are saying, well, it was just not being part of the political scene, being very naive, and that anyone, the president said it himself, anyone would do it, would take that meeting to get dirt on an opponent, in this case Hillary Clinton. Is that justifiable in your view?
No, I don't think we can normalize foreign governments trying to, I don't know, influence a candidate by providing information. And so anytime a foreign government, and by the way, most people have a pretty good understanding that the Russian intelligence service is hostile to the United States. There's no way around that. They do lots of hostile operations. They target Americans both here and overseas. They target people who work in the defense industry or work for government operations, trying to recruit them. They use blackmail like they used to do 20 years ago. They still do that. They use things called honeypots where they get, put people in compromising positions in order to blackmail them, to get information that they shouldn't be giving. This is a hostile intelligence service to the United States. Most people know that. If the Russian government calls and says, hey, we have information on your opponent, the first reaction should not be, and we should not normalize this behavior. Opposition research is a real thing, and it happens in politics every day. And people throw things at each other, you know, in an awful way in our politics every single election cycle. This is very different, and we should not normalize it. They should have, I'm not sure what their reaction should have been, but hiding it and not talking to the FBI right away, that saying, hey, the Russians are trying to give us information, this doesn't smell right, that should have been their reaction. And
now you have the possible testimonies of the former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, of advisor Jared Kushner, of Donald Trump Jr. Will this be a set of legal problems for all of these 3, or will they be strictly political ones, particularly for Kushner, since he is a White House advisor?
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think it's going to cause political problems either way. I mean, you have these folks up there talking about it's going to be a hostile questioning environment at those hearings. You know, my concern would be if I were advising them legal advice, there is an FBI investigation, or a Department of Justice investigation supported by the FBI with Bob Mueller. Do you really want somebody that, you know, could be implicated or might say something that they didn't say to the FBI? I was a little surprised to see that they're going to actually testify on the Hill, because remember, they're under oath. They could be charged with perjury if they lie. And if they tell the FBI one thing and the Senate another thing, they've got trouble ahead of them, legal trouble, where they might now only be in political trouble. So I was a little surprised to see it. It's going to be interesting to watch, and I guarantee you there's going to be folks from Department of Justice watching as eager as anyone, any other viewer of that testimony.
So the former campaign manager, Paul Manafort, is the vet here, you know, among the 3 there in terms of politics, being involved in many political arenas. So how much will he be pressed on knowing how this proposed meeting with Russians, you know, should have been handled? He wouldn't be able to proclaim being naive.
Yeah, well, I'm not. Listen, if a foreign government says, I don't buy that argument. As a former FBI agent, I'm not buying it. You know, if you've been in the business world and you understand how all that works, if a foreign government contacts you and says, I have information, that should have sent up a red flag all day long. But Manafort, you're right, he had dealings in Ukraine, so he should understand the length and effort of the Russian intelligence service. So just to have the meeting itself, you know, he's going to have a lot of explaining to do. And remember, Frederica, the investigators are going to look at this meeting and say, okay, no harm, no foul, no crime was committed, and I believe that's right in having the meeting. You know, it could be a judgment issue, but there's no crime committed. But what happened next? So this is where you have to understand that I think the investigators are going to start asking questions. So was there a subsequent meeting? Did they offer up a name for someone else on the campaign to go talk to? All of those things are now going to be trying to be determined by the FBI and the investigation with DOJ, because that's how you would know if the Russians were actually recruiting somebody. You know, again, their whole look at this is going to be try to find out, hey, were there financial transactions in the future? Did they recruit someone? Was this just a one-time gig that didn't work? Well, the Russians do that a lot. That in and of itself is not a crime.
Interesting. And now talk about timing. How about those Russian compounds? Russia wants access now to the compounds in Maryland and New York. The Obama administration, of course, kicking a number of the Russians out of that property. How detrimental potentially would it be if President Trump were to determine that they can now have access again to those compounds?
Well, I wouldn't do it, Frederica. You know, when the Russians left, they were in a hurry, and they took lots and lots of equipment out of those compounds. I wouldn't be in a hurry to give it back to them for sure. I don't think that they were pure vacation spots for the Russians. I think they used them as collection facilities, and I wouldn't give them back.